Welcome back to Edge of Intelligence, the show where we dive into real world AI adoption, opportunity, and impact. I'm Carl Owen, fractional CIO and AI advisory consultant, and today we're joined by someone deeply passionate about transforming operations through technology. Our guest is Emmitt Nantz, CEO and co-founder of Inventory Ally, an all-in-one cloud software focused on helping veterinary practices reduce inventory costs, streamline processes, and save time. With nearly 2 decades in vet ops, from managing a single hospital in Banfield to scaling Galaxy Vets to optimizing inventory via software, Emmett brings a rare mix of domain insight, process expertise, and SaaS leadership. Emmett, great to have you on the show.
Appreciate it, Carl. Thanks for having me.
To get us started, share a bit about how your journey from agriculture studies to running hospitals to building a SaaS company helped you identify inventory as a leverage point.
Sure. So I grew up farming and ranching in Eastern Oregon. It was my roots and whatnot. But then I moved to Portland and spent about a decade there. And during that time, I was able to join a company called Banfield, which is one of the largest organizations in veterinary medicine. Kind of young. It was something I happened into, but found I really enjoyed it. So first role there was managing a hospital. Did that pretty well. And then I grew into working at the headquarters doing large scale process improvement projects for the entire network of about 1,000 locations. So over time, I learned reporting, analytics, financial forecasting, and then Black Belt Six Sigma, project management, those types of things, really just on the job training to do the things I was trying to do. But as I continued to dig into it and understood really the inefficiencies within our sector, there's a lot of opportunity to get better and better. After about 13 years at Banfield, I joined a small startup software company that was focused on patient flow management. I led that company as the COO, CFO, and that took me down a path towards software and continued operations. So I found at a point where the veterinary space was getting highly consolidated by outside capital. Saw multiples on EBITDA going up based on arbitrage opportunities. But then when I saw that start to unwind a little bit because it got inflated, that bubble's about to pop. Well, I knew that they needed to improve their valuation at the EBITDA level, and just my knowledge and experience over about 20 years in the space, I knew that cost of goods sold was one of the biggest opportunities for that, and I knew how to solve for that. So that's why I leaned into the product I have now called Inventory Ally.
Nice. That gets me to my next question. I've seen where you've mentioned that using order history and predictive analytics helped optimize cost of goods sold. Can you walk us through how that works?
Yeah, well, when people think about inventory management, a lot of people have a decent sense of what that means. We need to make sure that we kind of optimize the replenishment of products so we have them to sell. But that the context of that is generally going to be in like a retail or manufacturing type of a design, where the math is quite straightforward. You think of a Walmart, we have to buy it so it's on the shelf, we sell it, we can see that it's sold, so we can drive a replenishment and we can kind of optimize the throughput of that. Manufacturing, I'm going to build an airplane. Well, I need one of these things and 10 of those things and 100 of these things. It's also fairly straightforward math. We need these components to build this output. But veterinary medicine is a service type of business. The majority of the revenue generated in a service business is just service interaction, but it's supported by goods. So what that means is there's a lot of consumption of product that lacks any transactional insights. So there's nothing showing that they've sold it and therefore deducting the inventory. And so it becomes very manual program. What we see in the veterinary space, and it's repeated in human dental, med spa, a variety of different service-based type businesses. They've got somebody who's not an expert in inventory that is designed or is supposed to reorder product. What happens is they end up building a lot of excess inventory because it's better to have too much than not enough, but that generates a lot of waste, stress, and frustrations, and it inflates their cost of goods sold, at least in our space, 2 to 4 points at minimum. So that's a lot of money and a lot of wasted time that could be going towards service, and so that's why there's a real opportunity in this.
So that, I mean, that gets to your point where I've seen it on your website where you've been able to reduce cost of goods sold from 29% to 21%. Um, what can you, let's kind of revisit that a little bit. What enabled that level of outcome?
Sure. Well, to continue on what I was saying before, what we've actually built is the ability to analyze historical orders and the patterns of consumption and replenishment. And then we optimize for those patterns of behavior such that high cost, high volume items are going to be replenished more frequently, as whereas low cost, low volume items less frequently. So we're optimizing for the turnover of those products based on the consumption demand of the products in that service design. And what we do, there's a few different things that we start to unwind. So high volume, high cost products are ordered more frequently, which actually puts more predictability into the replenishment demand of those products. Then what happens is we start to streamline the, I'll call it the future history, because we start with the historical, but then we start to create a new history that's going to be more insightful and therefore more predictable. And what happens to the cost of goods sold piece is multiple things start to happen. One, we're starting to eliminate waste. So when they have a bunch of excess, there's theft or expiration or breakage. There's a bunch of different ways that we have shrink. But by putting things in a higher rotation, you reduce the opportunities for that. And that's where we start to capture 2 to 4 points of cost of goods sold. But beyond that, you start to uncover visibility that is also kind of invisible. A big piece here is that we are buying product and then we're using it in a variety of different ways that some generate revenue and some doesn't. But when we start to combine those things, we unlock visibility to where there's margin loss, discount over overuse, product cost opportunities, and purchase leveraged purchase buying, leveraged purchased opportunities. So simply by streamlining and adding efficiency to the replenishment concept, you start to unlock visibility that can unlock another 2 to 4 points of COGS simply by becoming more strategic.
Nice. Well, and I know this has an impact on the staff too. So inventory related burnout is kind of a real thing. How does improved predictability impact staff morale and operational?
Great question, Carl. In the vet space, especially, there's a lot of burnout, and that burnout really is driven by the complexity of the operations. Right, a lot of especially in their space, the people are very energized by treating patients, treating pets, right? And that's what they got in business for. It's what they like doing. But then they become overwhelmed with all the other stuff that needs to be done just to be able to deliver that service. Inventory is a big component of that. Because if you're running short on product, that's very stressful. You can't provide care. It's also if you run short on product, the doctor gets upset with you because you were supposed to order it. So that's going to lead even to more excess ordering. The client's going to be disappointed, right? If you can't provide the service that needs to be done and they have to go somewhere else, they're probably not coming back. That's long term degradation to your business success. Real success of a service business is your customers come back and refer their friends. That experience is going to be non optimal. And that all weighs on the staff as well. So burnout prevention is really about automating the operational flows and processes as much as possible so they can focus on client and patient care. Now, Inventory Ally that I've built is designed specifically for that. We lean as much as we can to, or as I said before, we don't have clear visibility in like the systems that exist. Inventory Ally will actually triangulate 3 data points: purchase history, sales history, and cycle count engagement. 3 different data points that gives us a high degree of accuracy of how much they need, how much they have, and how much they need to order. And with that, we build automation. So we're significantly simplifying the optimization capability of inventory replenishment, which then relieves the staff of all the extra work. So one of the big key points that we drive is instead of spending 6 to 8 hours a week on inventory, let's narrow that down to 30 minutes once a week, put all that time back into client patient care, which is long-term success and burnout reduction.
Nice. Inventory Ally uses predictive analytics. How much of that's powered by basic statistics versus AI or machine learning?
Yeah, a lot of the algorithms are basic statistics. So let's look at the regression on consumption versus transactions and figure out predictability based on that and help it self-adjust. When it comes to AI is really where it's at right now, and the way we leverage it is how can we use more of the large language model design and the to recreate commonality, I guess is the way I'd say it. The way we look at it is, one of the things we want to do is we want to map PIMS transactional data, which is free-form text from their practice management system. And we need to map that to the items that they order, which is fairly standardized. But because that free-form text from the practice management, it can be called anything from anywhere. A large language model application of AI helps us map that much easier than we were able to do before, which gives us enhanced insights and data input into the statistical regressions to make those run better and faster. So it's a mix of both. But what we found is that AI is a great way to kind of replicate what is it done across a lot of locations. We use it for room assignments, PIMS mapping, a variety of other things. But it's really just trying to reduce the amount of manual effort that goes into setting up the product, whereas we use the statistical analytics to really drive the algorithms behind the system.
Is advanced AI or generative tech on your roadmap for things like demand forecasting, anomaly detection, or even intelligent replenishment bots?
Yeah, absolutely. It's on there because one of the things that we can start to look at, get more sophisticated with the AI is let's look into the future. So we can start to look at appointment scheduling, for example, and see if there's any variation in the future of the appointments relative to historical and what's that going to do to demand. So we can actually start to adjust the order quantities to make sure that we can accommodate what's coming. Seasonality is a big piece that has a lot of variability to it. So AI can start to help us dive into that a little bit easier as well, modifying some of the calculations. And then there's ways that we work with other systems and other softwares in the space. So using generative AI is going to get us to a point where we can actually really enhance the automation through pulling in data in combination with other systems that might not be as structured or as really inventory specific, but identifying the correlations and the impacts there can enhance the predictability in the future, I think.
Partner integrations like your recent launch with Shepherd Vet Software, what role does shared data play and where can AI bridge some of those gaps?
Yeah. So Shepherd is an example of the practice management systems or the PIMS that I've referred to a couple times. And they're really going to be focused on medical record retention, invoicing, and kind of some of the basics associated with the revenue generation side of the business. We partner with them to be able to identify the transactions that happen so that we can run those regressions and understand that transactional sales relative to the order patterns that we've already talked about. So that's how we partner there. But that's also where we then start to source, say, the appointment data. So we can start to do that forward looking. We can also then start to partner with other softwares that are maybe client facing, right? There's the pet owner apps that are out there that start to track um, like behaviors and health status and things to that effect that start to pull back through like a shepherd, which can also start to create indicators that we can use to identify, when we really scale this thing to the highest degree and apply the generative AI, we start to look at health behaviors that are flowing through different systems, maybe within a geographical area that maybe there's a parvo expansion, right? And so there's going to be an increased demand on certain supplies that we need to start to account for. That can be a feedback loop back to the distributors and suppliers to say, hey, let's start to ramp some of this up because demand's going to increase in this area. Like those are ways that you can start to do all those various different data sets, and through generative AI model that gives us high predictability to streamline the supply chain in this case.
What are some of the top challenges that you're seeing? Is it data quality, integration, trust, or cost? I mean, that slow the adoption of AI in this space.
Yeah, it's primarily going to be data. Data, I mean, a lot of garbage in, garbage out. So how do you clean the data, you normalize that data, make it useful and predictable, and then trust. So there's a high dependency in this space, especially on manual process. So organic knowledge, I understand this business, I understand my products, I understand my team, and dependence on that manual solution that they've had so long because an automated system has not worked for them in the past. So overcoming that barrier to entry is one of the key pieces. But to overcome that, you really build social trust, social awareness, and you go through the change curve, crossing the chasm. The early adopters, early majority, late adopters, are late majority, and laggards. You build that over time to build that trust piece. And so we really focus heavily on how do we, normalize, standardize as much as we can, at least making the data useful in an AI environment so we can, whether it's data lake design or it's really leaning into the generative and let that take care of it. Data's going to be the harder part.
Yeah, I would think so. Having come from the dental and healthcare space myself,
Mhm.
it seems like this is just a perfect opportunity to move into that space as well. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, what we find is this is a really good solution for a service-based design business. So I just am very familiar with the veterinary space, but we've already explored human dental as an example, med spa, human eye care. Those are all medical, but it can even expand beyond that. We actually just got back a couple of weeks ago from a conference in Orlando called the Institute for Supply Management. So their 110th year. They produce a number of reports for the economic forecasts for the government and such. They're very, very focused on manufacturing, hospitality, retail, supply chain management. We came away with an award there for innovation in procurement and supply chain. What I learned there was there's actually an application for this even within large manufacturers. They have a lot of predictability in some of their primary components, but lack of predictability and transactional insights, if you will, to things like grease and belts and just consumables, if you will, even in that space that don't have a good solution. So there's even some cross-reference application for something like this in those. So that was fun and exciting to learn about.
Well, yeah, congrats on the award.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was exciting. We went up, we were on the stage with a couple of other very large organizations that it was nice to be recognized next to them.
Well, this kind of gets to what you were just talking about, but beyond inventory forecasting, what manual workflows are you still seeing that are bleeding time out there or causing inconsistency?
Yeah, one of the main things I'd love to be able to work on in this space is labor management. Not a very good tool. You could do shift management, those types of things. There's solutions for that. But what I find, and especially again in a service design, is that there's a lack of supply demand match. Right? We tend to build schedules associated with when people want to work, and then we build schedules for when people want to bring their pets in, but those things don't necessarily overlap. A lot of the demand for service is either in the morning or in the evening, but the demand for labor, the want for labor is more throughout the kind of middle of the day. So how do you balance those types of things? How do you can you do a supply demand more better match that adds efficiencies, economies to the growth patterns of the business, so they're not underwater on the labor side. So that's a good example of where there's still a lot of opportunity. When we see new new software, new product launch, most of it is always focused on revenue generation and how can you add more revenue, add more predictability to customer flow, and those types of patterns. But when you really dig into the P&L, there's a lot of other opportunities to streamline the cost component of the bottom line, or the EBITDA line, that could be optimized. So you're not losing as much of that revenue that you generate to waste and efficiency. So in our space, labor and cost of goods sold are the two biggest expenses on that P&L, and why they have a good opportunity.
Well, in the veterinary space and even in healthcare as a whole, those folks wear a lot of hats. Do you see opportunities for chatbot assistance or process automation for common tasks out there?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're already starting to see quite a bit of it. I think over the last 2 years, we've seen about 35 new softwares hit the market, specifically focused on note taking. Right, so they'll listen to the conversation in the room. They'll generate, pre-formatted SOAP notes that can then plug back into the PIMS, which saves a ton of time. Right, that has generally been something that takes hours every day to try to capture those notes, either by the doctor themselves or by a vet tech. Actually, one of the projects I worked on at Banfield years ago, before AI, was the doctors were spending 2 to 3 hours after the close of business to try to go back and finish all their notes before they could tackle it. And it was leading very significantly to burnout. I built some process improvements and stuff that started to make those notes done throughout the day, but it was using scribes, like manual scribes and the staff to help capture that. So these AI scribes are starting to replace that and adding a ton of efficiency, which is great. And there's other ways too, because you could start to then use generative design to look back through the medical records. They presented for this. We then diagnosed these things and ran these tests, and then we prescribed these medications. But how can we start to find those patterns? Because I think a lot of people understand in medicine, human or otherwise, um, look for the horse, not the zebra. And that's because most of the treatment is really quite predictable and consistent. You still need the doctor's perspective and review, but how can we eliminate the manual effort of getting through that process? I think there's a ton of opportunity that we're going to see AI exacerbate there.
I agree with you there, and I still think we have a trust issue we're going to have to overcome.
We are, and that might be generational to displace. It may take a little while because you're going to have early adopters and younger generations that So it may take a little while to rotate through that, which is going to be interesting to watch because the AI side of things is going to accelerate exponentially, like we've never seen anything grow before. Um, the generational adoption of that, it's going to be interesting for
Yeah, and that
sure.
kind of gets to my next question around barriers to entry. So from your experiences, what's the biggest barrier between an initiative and full rollout? Is it standards, data, change management, executive buy-in?
No, it's really just continuing on what we were just talking about. It's the change component of it. It's the human element. Absolutely. And so trusting a program can do something, depending on that program to make your life easier. But really, it's going to be the resistance of this is how I've done it, or I know how to do it this way. We even have it right within our own team. We see where we're creating new things each time, but then we keep training on the old. Like the team even has a hard time of keeping up with things that we develop for customers, and it's just human nature, right? It's hard. It's easier to do what I know and have always done. It works. It's good enough than to take the time to try to adopt something new, even though I know that it's going to be easier for me or better for me. um, Commitment to disrupt my life is one of the biggest barriers I think that we run into with software adoption.
Are you seeing anything out there where folks are resistant due to concerns over job loss or things like that? That's one of the things that I deal with a lot when I'm going into some of my clients.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and we've seen it a couple times. We've had demonstrations or product demos. I could think of three of them off the top of my head in the last couple of months where they said, "I love what you have, but it will put me out of a job, so I'm not interested." Like, very specifically and directly saying such. And what we lean into is like we're going to automate the manual component of this, but it actually elevates your role to be more strategic, right? You get to decide on the pricing strategies and the supplier strategies, and you can work with the team more, and you can fill those other roles that you're leaning into more so. It doesn't always resonate, but yeah, we certainly hear some of that. For the most part, with what we are dealing with, most customers are going, this is going to just make my life so much easier and reduce the burden and the stress. And that's really where we want to live. Yeah, one of the sayings I use quite a bit is it's not a solution if they don't see that there's a problem.
Right.
So you can't have a solution for somebody if they don't think that there's a problem to solve. Sometimes we'll spin our wheels a little bit trying to convince them that they have a problem. Sometimes we get there, sometimes we don't. But yeah, we do see customers suggesting that it's going to displace them. But for the most part, we see a vast majority of them saying this is making my life a whole lot easier and I'm all in.
Yeah, I think you hit on that fact, making it more strategic, and this is an enabler. It's not something to replace your position. I mean, yeah, that's something I think people will get used to over time as they become more and more used to AI in their lives. But, and it's certainly, you've alluded to this as well. It's certainly a change management process and function as well, going through all this. That's key to the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say a practice wants to level up from reactive tech use to proactive predictive operations. What would you advise them to prioritize?
Specifically veterinary medicine.
Yeah, sure. We can start there.
Mm. Well, because it's the space that I know, right? And it's kind of back to what I'd said before. This is it's a service example, and so the key value delivery is in the engagement between two people, the pet owner and the doctor and the team. We need to maximize the potential of that. And so where they start needs to be in what's standing in the way of that. Now, inventory is an example of that, but it's generally just a couple people in the team. But there's a lot of other tools you can start to think about within a veterinary role or anywhere else. Um, anybody that's got background in like Lean Six Sigma design, think about a spaghetti map, for example. Where do we keep walking 50 feet 50 times a day that we can maybe reposition something? Well, one of the things that I'm going with that is that there's now technology that you can put in a location like that with that can help track and create those spaghetti maps. So you can actually start to understand where there's bottlenecks, where there's redundancy, where there's wasted effort that can start to be streamlined. That's an example of how we can start to use technology and even the generative AI overlay to that to give us clear insights where we're inefficient, where we're running into ourselves, where we're creating a lot of waste. And that's where I'd say we start to tackle is identifying the waste and then looking for solutions on those. Again, in a service business, it's about the operational inefficiencies that prevent us providing care. So that's where I would start. What's creating the most waste and inefficiency to that output?
Great insight there. Looking ahead, how do you envision Inventory Ally evolving towards prescriptive optimization, AI embedded workflows, or intelligent benchmarking?
Yes, great question. Um, One of the key pieces that we're wanting to lean into is how do we help optimize the entire supply chain? Because what we're solving for in the hospital is kind of the root cause of the inefficiency in the supply chain because it creates unpredictability, just a lot of sporadic ordering, inconsistent, and very dependent on an individual gut feel. So when you start to replace some of that at the hospital with data and consistency and therefore predictability, well, that then starts to play back into the distribution and the manufacturing side of things. What we start to unlock with that is far more waste reduction and therefore value capture that can then, in my mind, either come back as cost reduction or we run into back orders a lot. So we're trying to order something and it's not available. Well, with higher predictability and efficiency and throughput in the entire supply chain, we start to reduce some of that, which all comes back to patient care. So that's where we really want to lean in. And as we scale and grow, how can we apply AI tools both throughout that supply chain component to enhance um, uh, delivery to patient care, to the hospitals, to patient care delivery, but also just a ton of value to unlock throughout that entire chain of supply offerings. So right now we're focused heavily on how do we partner with those that are in the space. There's marketplace solutions in the space. There's manufacturers, distributors, group purchasing organizations. They're all partners that we're working with on that type of a design, so we can continue to enhance its value add for everybody involved.
Well, there's a lot of consolidation in the vet space, in the dental space, and healthcare space. So, as practices consolidate, like your partnership with Vertical Vet, what technology gaps are you seeing most frequently during some of those integrations?
Yeah, one of the biggest technology gaps that we have in the space is just the complexity of different PIMS or practice management systems. There's a lot of inconsistency when it comes to the freeform text across all these programs. We actually have probably about 65%, I think is the last I heard, um, of the hospitals in our space are still on legacy practice management systems, which are server based, right? Instead of cloud based. Now, there's a lot of cloud based options out there, but there's no standard data structure across what we're doing. So it creates a lot of complexity. Now, as we take that into the consolidation um, of these hospitals, they all come with their own practice management system, and to switch to a new one is very cumbersome and disruptive in the hospital. Like it's a multi-month process. Um, what we're offering is the ability to actually recognize that the order side of things is quite consistent. There's a few suppliers as primary manufacturer products that everybody tends to use. And what we've created with the AI component I talked about earlier is we map that PIMS data to that more standardized product history at the hospital level, but it gives us a clear visibility of a roll up for these enterprises of what are they buying, what are they selling, what are their margins, what's their shrink, those types of insights without having to consolidate to a common PIMS to have common structure, which has been the traditional design. And so that gives them a far more momentum and insight without having to force major disruption on the technology side with the software. So that's one of the big pieces we've seen is as they consolidate, they're trying to get standard visibility and insights to a number of these across their network of hospitals. And the default has been just put them all in the same PIMS, but I think we're opening up capabilities so they don't necessarily have to go through that pain.
Yeah, that is, having been through that multiple times, that's a very painful process, and people, you got to pull them along kicking and screaming.
It
And
is.
everybody does it a little differently. Do you bring all the legacy data over? Do you not? How do it's all different. So, good point.
Right. Well, there's been use of like data lakes to try to create, unstructured data with normalization through data lakes too, and that's had varying degrees of success. But it's also a major effort to try to pull together. It still requires somebody on the back end to try to create those connections on what's what. So
That's right. That's right. What's the biggest AI moonshot you dream of? Autonomous inventory bots, dynamic pricing engines, or something else?
yeah, that's a really good question. And I like your setup on that because I would lean towards pricing. As I dig into inventory solutions in the space that we work in, there's a ton of inefficiency. We've talked about that. We can optimize the inefficiencies and such. But when it comes down to it, one of the key performance indicators or KPIs is the cost of goods sold against the P&L. And that one, I talk about this a lot because a lot of customers will talk to me like, we want to make our COGS 20%. I say, well, why 20%? Because that's what everybody says it's supposed to be. So actually, if you break it down, if you're an ER, you should be more like 10%. If you're a mixed animal or large animal, you might push 30%. If you're a small GP, 22. Is you're a large GP, 18. Like there's varying degrees based on your size. And I do that. I'm going there because the cost of goods sold is actually a makeup of your size, your generation of service revenue versus goods revenue. You've got who you're buying from. Do you have leverage and buying power? Which are you using generic products or brand name products? Um, there's so many different things to go into the outcome of cost of goods sold, but that means that there's a lot of additional opportunity to optimize it. So I lean into the pricing piece that you're talking about because there is a way that we can start to generate predictive strategic pricing for these hospitals. And it's something I've outlined already. And I believe generative AI can help me get there faster by pulling in things like consumer price index, calculating product price elasticity across the network of locations and offering them a sense of where they're at, where they could go relative to their population. And that helps unlock a lot of opportunity when it comes to cost of goods sold. That's not just the inventory.
Nice. Or someone like Vertelligent and you guys to collaborate, what would that look like?
Yeah, well, it's going to dig into a little bit more of what we talked about already as far as the complexities, and it's going to come to the data side. I believe on this side, right? Not the change management as much, but merely on the data side. Because what I found is we've talked about it a little bit already, but there's vertical expansion, and there's even global expansion of this type of offering. So there's different service verticals, and there's global application of this. But then you start to mess with all kinds of different data sets. Now the replenishment demand and frequency of optimized replenishment is kind of consistent, but how do you start to match those multiple data sets and bring things to um, simplicity? And the thing that is really an opportunity there is not just on the data, but it's really how do you then present it to customers in a format. What I've found works well is how do you present it in a way that's familiar, that you're starting to automate some of the things that they are doing manually, and then over time you start to introduce more familiar or new concept because it's a gradual influenced transition or evolution, if you will, from where they're at to where they need to be. Because the more you move away from the manual dependency and what they're familiar with, the more value you can unlock for them, in my mind. So you start to create the automation on the data, but you have to kind of help them get there and just bring them over more of a transformation timeline or a roadmap is what's really important. So I think working together on those types of things and making AI the right thing to do is not to say, hey, this is AI. To your point, they know how to spell it. What's it actually doing? Well, that what that means is that what's it doing for me? How does it make my life easier? How do I trust this thing to really enhance my livelihood? That's the key piece of AI is it needs to be in a format that's easily consumed and something they can trust. Um, so it's got to have some familiarity to it and then the trust to be able to evolve from it.
I 100% agree with that. Well, Emmett, this has been a terrific conversation. Your work in streamlining inventory and your vision for embedding intelligence into everyday workflows is truly impactful. For any vet practice leaders listening, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
I just encourage them to go to inventoryally.com, take a look, schedule a demo. We love to sit and just walk them through. One of my favorite things to do is just a demonstration so I can understand where they're at, what are their frustrations, what are the pain points, and how can we help solve for that. But actually getting going on Inventory Ally is a 15-minute setup and about 30 minutes once a week for 4 weeks to get onboarded. It's a really intuitive, easy to use program. But yeah, check us out at inventoryally.com. I appreciate that.
Perfect. And for our audience, if this has brought up any questions about putting AI into action or optimizing operations, or even just bridging gaps between strategy and tech execution, let's connect at Protelligent.com. Until next time, ask smarter questions, build smarter systems, and stay at the edge of intelligence.